Yeah, definitely. Well, man, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out. You have a very unique and intriguing combination of
Uh,
talents that
Thanks.
I'm looking forward to getting into. But before we do that, I want to talk about something that I know that we're all getting fatigued by, but it was definitely something that
Mhm.
changed us all, which was COVID, surviving the
Yeah.
pandemic. How did you
Yes.
survive that time period, and how has it subsequently changed the way that you do things now?
Yeah, yeah, no. So, uh, COVID changed everything. So, as an emergency physician, the toll that that took on healthcare frontline workers, uh, it almost sucked your will to live, you know. So, in addition to what it changed kind of culturally, when what it did to Generation Z, like this younger generation, which is the whole purpose, you kind of be the weight behind the spear. My whole leadership ethos came from that. But like this whole generation, I mean, they struggled anyways with communication skills. Like these kids can't talk to each other without an iPhone. You know, they literally just sit right next to each other and text each other. And
Yeah,
this is the first generation that has been like that iPhone generation. They've never known anything but that. So then you shut them out of school,
yeah.
you shut them out of churches, and just what it did to them as an emergency doctor, I see the anxiety, the depression, the suicides. And as a military commander, what I see with these kids is the just the lack of discipline, the lack of any resiliency, and they just don't have the leadership and communication skills. So a lot of issues.
You know, the one thing I was hopeful for when this happened with my kids was that there would be that resiliency. You know, when
Mhm.
everything went away, you didn't have any choice, and I think that that might materialize more later on, but I think that was definitely a part
Mhm.
of this generation. But that's the thing about it. Like, I work in a public school system. I'm an IT guy, and I've seen what it's done to these kids. The halting of their education, socio emotional, all of that for several years. A, how do you get that back? And B, how do you stop this advent of technology that always duplicates itself?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's the trick, and that's what, be the weight behind the spear is all about. That's that book is my prescription. That's how we
Yeah.
fix the problem. So it's gone well so far.
So let me ask you this. If I was to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day and one of the kids was curious what you do for a living, and they're like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your answer?
Yeah, I'm a doctor, so I'm an emergency doctor, and then also serve in the military, and I have my own kids, so I got a lot of stuff to keep me busy.
Absolutely. So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
Boy, third grade. Yeah, I remember Miss Griffith. Gosh, I love giving the shout out to teachers because they have such a huge part to play. The best resource in this country, and my wife's a teacher as well. Um, I know I read the book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That was one of the first books I read as a third grader, and kind of just opened up my mind and the imagination. At the time, I thought maybe we get to play some professional football, or maybe be a fireman or something. Before life kicked in, and I was 112 pounds in high school, and you cannot play football.
Yeah, I was 4'11" in high school and I couldn't do it. I wanted to play baseball. There was all these things. The only thing I could do was cross country running,
Oh, nice.
and I was still like, I mean, the legs were as tall as my body, so I had to run like double time to try to keep up with everybody.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love sports. I was a wrestler, so
Okay.
that's the ultimate accountability sport. Running is great too. It's like
Yeah.
either you're faster or you're not.
Yeah.
And wrestling is just you and one other guy on the mat, and you either worked hard enough, or you worked harder, or you were better, or you weren't. And there's
Yeah.
nobody to blame. Nobody dropped the pass. Nobody, missed a play. Like it's just you.
It's the ultimate individual sport, so to speak. Um,
Yes.
so let me ask you this. Take me back to your childhood. What were these foundational seeds that were planted into you that had you get into medicine, get in the military, and now at this point being a writer and an author? How did all of these things get harvested into you?
Yeah, it's product of a very blue collar, upbringing in a super small town of Western Nebraska. If you're in Kansas City, you head up north to Nebraska, and then about 7 or 8 hours to the west to almost the middle of nowhere before you hit Wyoming. And it's ranch land and agricultural land, just great hardworking people. My dad was a railroader, so my whole family, it comes from my grandfather, my great grandfather were all railroaders. So, just working hard, you know, ethics, I had great teachers. They all knew exactly what I was doing when I got in trouble. My dad knew before I got home, very small town. And I got in extra trouble when I got home. So they kept me in line. They were empowered to really hold kids accountable. And that's a problem that they, have now because my wife's a teacher and my mom, the stories I hear are crazy. So just, just really hard working. Sports were an outlet for me, baseball, wrestling, and very much motivated me to work extremely hard in school so I could get out of the town. I mean, I love the town and the people, but I just I could not be contained.
Yeah. So what was it about the military how did that become your path?
Always a huge military history buff. So born in 1977, right? So I've lived in the shadow of the Vietnam War my entire life. And I always had tremendous amount of respect for men and women that have served. I've seen every Vietnam movie, Platoon, Apocalypse Now, Deer Hunter, Full Metal Jacket. That's what I was raised on, and I always wanted to serve in the military. So I had an ROTC scholarship I applied for in high school, and then went to a small school in Western Nebraska, Chadron State College. They did not have a program, so I was not able to use the ROTC scholarship. But when I got into medical school, I took a direct commission. I started off as a medical service corps branch officer, and then when I graduated medical school as a medical corps officer. And boy, of all the things I've done professionally, the military career is the one that I'm most proud of. I feel I've had the most impact, and the one combat tour that really changed me a lot.
You know, th being a physician, there's so many avenues that you can take, but you're in emergency medicine. That has to be a different animal. What was it that impelled you to get into that line?
Well, I'm an adrenaline junkie. So
Yeah.
first off, I get bored very easy, which people ask me how I do all these things that I do. That's just the way I'm wired.
Yeah.
I probably has a lot to do with my father and my upbringing, but I love the challenge of it. I mean, you're literally making life and death decisions, on a daily basis. And I thrive under that pressure. Some people can't. There's some people, you get somebody shot in the face and stabbed and, laying in front of you, they seize up. Even physicians, there's physicians that just can't deal with those type of high pressure situations. But emergency physicians generally are the ones that thrive in chaos, can manage and multitask very well, and super adrenaline junkies. So that was right up my alley.
So how do you separate that zygote, so to speak, between you have this work life where you see intense, deep things, and then you have your life that's full of all of these different elements that make you who you are? How do you separate what you see with what you live to make sure that everything's a clean slate on both sides?
But exceptionally difficult, and that's something you have to learn as a student and as a resident. Is you have to have something to fall back on, because that amount of pressure and the death and destruction and just the horrible things that people do to one another, it consumes you, and it's hard not to internalize that. So for me, I've always been able to lean on family and my faith. I remember very distinctly my first SIDS death, so sudden infant death syndrome. A
Yeah.
little baby is brought into the emergency department. I was a student, and dad is coming running in with a limp baby, and it just kicks in. We're doing lines, we're intubating, and just getting all these medications and code drugs started, and it was not successful. And you're so focused on that when the mother ran in, because she came from work, and she just runs into the room like, "Where's my baby?" And you have to tell her, "I'm sorry, your child is dead." And just you watch her just break down, and just your worst thing. Did you have kids?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's your worst possible nightmare. And everybody's crying. I'm crying. The nurses are crying. And I went home. I was doing a rotation at the University of Washington, so I went to my mom's house, and I had a huge headache. I had never been under that type of stress before, and it about destroyed me. And I just said a prayer. I was like, "Listen, I don't know if I can do this. I'm gonna need some help." And I went for a run. So I ran for about 6, 7 miles. That's always been my stress relief. So
Yeah.
if you're super stressed out, you just run until you throw up. Like, it's kind of hard to be stressed out anymore because you're so tired. So that's been my release, is just the physical exercise and pushing myself there. But you just learn that I can't save everybody. I study extremely hard and I'm very good at what I do. But if God wants to take somebody, he's going to take them.
Yeah.
And, he works through you, and I've saved a ton of lives, and there's some that I haven't saved, and that you can't dwell on that. If you do it, you won't survive this job.
Did you ever watch the show Monk?
I did. Yes,
Okay.
that's a great show.
Yeah, did you see the reboot they did where it was COVID times and he was in heaven because there was gloves
No
and
way.
masks? Oh yeah.
Oh yes. Gosh, my wife and I were talking about that show the other day. No, I haven't seen the reboot. No.
Oh, okay, so I don't want to give too much away, but there's a scene in there where, we all come as professionals to this existential road where we're like, how much good are we doing? What kind of effect are we having? Because sometimes you do things and you don't know how that's going to ripple out into the world. And
Yeah.
with Monk, he was doing some heavy stuff, but it was all about people that had already died and how was he. So anyway, you need to watch it because there's a scene, and I
Okay.
want you to cue in where it's towards the end of the movie and he's on the bench, kind of like waiting for Godot, just questioning what he's done his whole life. And it kind
Oh
of goes
wow.
back to what you just said. There's a level of revelatory in our lives, whether it's being a middle-aged guy or a professional that's been around for a while, where you start realizing that what you're doing makes total sense. So yeah, watch it. I don't want to give it
Huh,
away. And
that's great.
yeah, so it's good. You got to give it a shot. Yeah, I got a
Okay.
call about a month ago. I was going out of town and I got a call from the nurse. My son is 19 and he's on the spectrum,
Mhm.
and he had fainted at school, and they called, and the receptionist at the school said, your son just passed out and he's not breathing. And everything, like when you were explaining that story, like everything just stopped, but it all went blank. And I was
Mhm.
like, wait, what'd you just say? And then I just immediately like left and went to the school. And when those things happen as a parent, to see that all the time, it's just like it has to be unimaginable. But
Oh,
we all have our role, and we all have to be there. And what's been one of the most surprising responses you've gotten from somebody after the fact, after you did your work on them? Have you had one of those moments where someone came back and said, man, you saved my life, or this happened,
yeah.
or that happened?
I have, and those ones really mean a lot to you. Emergency medicine, everyone thinks of all the glory stuff, right? Like saving lives and gunshots and car accidents, but so much of it is mental health issues and like drug-seeking behavior and just people that are just really on some really bad times and at the worst part of their life, and people can get pretty mean and nasty and do some horrible things to each other. But when you sit down and have some very real conversations with people and you're honest, like some addicts and some people with some chronic pain issues that maybe it just really came down to, I mean, they were 250 pounds overweight, and like, just let's be honest here, I'm not going to give you a bunch of opiates that you potentially can overdose and die, but you need to address this. Some people, like the addicts, get really mad and upset with you. But just about 2 weeks ago, I had a discussion with a patient. um, I actually was there was one where a family member was dying, and I just had a really in-depth conversation because I really try to put my heart and soul into my job. I,
Yeah.
I I really care, and some people don't appreciate it when you don't give them the narcotic that they're asking for. But a family member came back and just had some really good words and thanked me, and really had changed their life there. Um, it felt really good. I don't get that type of follow-up because I generally see people one time and I don't really see them ever again as an emergency doctor. But they had that family member came back a couple weeks later and gave me some follow-up that it was very nice.
I remember when David Letterman had his big procedure and he pulled the doctor on the show and they had a big to do, and that's always
Yeah.
cool, those
Yep.
kinds of things. So who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration for all of this work that you've done?
I've had some great leaders. I've had, a few bad leaders. Sometimes you joke with people, what's a good leader? Like, well, wait till you've had a couple of bad ones and then you recognize
Yeah.
immediately. So I've had some good mentorship with leaders, with family, my parents. And then I'm a huge history buff. So some of my big heroes, like General MacArthur, General Patton, um, the Major Winters, I think he retired to Lieutenant Colonel. Are you a fan of Band of Brothers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Dick Winters,
Yeah.
the commander of Easy Company, and
Yeah.
that I've kind of followed his career. And obviously, was a big fan of the show, but then you read more about him. just some great individuals. If you notice, there's a theme there, that World War II generation.
Yeah,
And I really feel that's probably America's best generation.
yeah.
And you can learn a lot from them. And this current generation that really lacks a lot of that. Oh, they haven't been exposed to those types of things. And they just have lived in a different world. And so you have to find a way to relate to them and still get these skills taught. So that's the challenge.
So, if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now that you find inspirational, spend a little time with them, who would that be?
Ooh, that's a great question. Anybody alive?
Well, we could open it up to the ghosts too. We could do either way.
Yeah. Um, Elon Musk is a very intriguing individual. And you talk about, because your son's on the spectrum. So there's
Yeah,
a gentleman who's clearly on the spectrum. And my nephew is too. So one of my brother's kids is on the spectrum. And
yeah.
their brains just work a little bit different,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah,
And they are capable of some amazing, amazing things because they aren't constrained by some of the social things that constrain human beings. Their mind doesn't work like that. So
yeah.
I would love to just sit down with him sometime and pick his brain, because he's obviously clearly very, very successful in business. And just maybe see if I can pick up some. I love to learn. I don't have a
Yeah.
big ego. I'll take criticism and leadership tips from anybody. So I think that'd be someone I would enjoy sitting down and just picking his brain.
So you've been in the classroom around students and you've had this life of so many varied experiences. What, at the end of the day, do you really want your students to get from the experiences that you've had in life?
Yeah, I just want them to have that full appreciation of not getting too big of an ego. I mean, they're all like, because I was at Duke University, when I was teaching,
Yeah.
and they're all super bright individuals. They've gone through college, medical school, and residency, and can handle the stressors of that job. But to do it without getting a big ego, to do it with kind of more of a servant mindset, that, I mean, we all went into medicine to help people. You can tell the people that kind of went in for the ego or the title, or because mommy or daddy wanted them to be, just the egos and stuff. Especially as an emergency doctor, I deal with surgeons and neurosurgeons and cardiothoracic surgeons, and I have seen just some, oh, we'll keep it G-rated. Just people, like, unbelievable. How could you treat people like that? So
Yeah.
you see a lot of egos and attitudes and the narcissism. But just teaching them that you can't know everything. You have to know your limitations. So you know doctors don't kill people. Idiot doctors that don't know their limitations kill people.
Yeah.
So you can't know everything. Don't have a big ego. Be there because for the right reasons, and just you're learning every day.
It's interesting. I have a jazz radio show, and I have found in my life, of all the people that I've run into, jazz musicians are some
Oh,
of the best people on the planet. And what you just said right there is a lot of what they try to teach the younger generation. They want to keep the art form intact. They want to keep the torch going as bright as possible, as yellow as possible. But there is that notion, and it's refreshing because I think maybe it's age, wisdom, when you get to a certain point where you just you have to realize we're all human at the end of the day. No matter who we're seeing on
mhm.
TV or in the news or dealing with, we're all on a cellular level, and we all have that moment before we fall asleep at night where we reflect on our existence and we're all
Yes.
there.
Hey, I've got a great question. If you're a jazz fan, then,
Yeah,
so where is the best? I mean, I do enjoy jazz as well. My grandfather was a jazz musician out in Seattle. He
yeah.
died. Boy, he was real young. I wish I could have talked to him. But what's the best streaming? Is there a good streaming station for jazz?
I have two that I listen to. Okay, I
Yeah,
on
you'd
TuneIn,
be a good guy for this.
absolutely. So KCSM, it's out of San Mateo over in San Francisco. Beautiful station. And one of the most storied ones is KJazz 88.1, and it's in Long Beach. It serves the LA area. But those stations, man,
Okay,
they'll
nice.
set you straight.
Okay, and you can stream them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I stream them all
Fantastic.
the
All
time.
right,
They, I,
wrote it down.
yeah, I'm one of those guys that has to have sound in a room, so I always have one of my little home things going, and there's always music or something going on. So
Fantastic. Love
you're
that
in.
tip.
So let me ask you this: every day you wake up, what is your motivation to do the work that you do? You're obviously operating on a level of high adrenaline, but helping people. You're also a writer. You have all of these diversified pieces of who you are. But what is the ultimate motivator for you every day?
Yeah. What can I do today that's going to put America in a better place? I've got three children. I want them to be successful. I want them to have, pride in being Americans and have opportunities. Just I see a lot in this current generation that I've been dealing a lot with that just is has me concerned. And so, what can I do to make America a better place today? Is that in military uniform? Is it, going to the hospital? Is it, you know, getting my message with the book out there and doing speaking engagements or going to schools or colleges? What can I do today that's going to make a difference?
So let's say, speaking of youth, let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 18-year-old version of you, and
Hmm.
you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've lived, the wisdom you've accumulated along your route. What advice would you impart on that young version of you?
So I changed as a person in Iraq,
Yeah.
and just seeing the death and the destruction. And, I get there, so the best advice is nobody cares what kind of car you drive. Nobody cares how big your house is. And nobody cares how much money you make. Nobody cares. If you're surrounding yourself with people that's all they care about, then you chose poorly. So, you know, don't focus on those things. Find out what makes you happy. And I've obviously found that, but I mean, it took some life and death experiences in Iraq to change that for me, and I came home a completely different person. So that's my good words of advice.
My dad used to always tell me, don't ever tell anybody how much you make, and no one wants to hear about your money problems. And there's all of these
Yep.
little, you know what I'm saying? There's all these little basic elements because at the end of the day, I mean, it's like looking at we just got done with an election cycle. It's been high pressure in America. And at the end of the day, the thing that I find astonishing about, especially doing podcasting, is we're all so much more alike. The media has this bleed it leads mentality of making it seem like we're so divided. But at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, we're all really kind of following the same little pencil line that's going to this horizon. And we all want these things for ourselves, for our family. And there's just elemental things that are just very synonymous with all of us.
Yeah, but boy, they sure like to divide it up there and have more clickbait and
Yeah.
sell more stories. Like, man, they make it think it's at the end of the world, huh?
Yeah, they certainly do. So at the end of the day, of all of these things that you've accomplished and become and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
The family.
Yeah,
The family for sure. I mean, professionally, the military career, I felt like I've had the most impact and have done some very special things. I've worked with some real heroes. But the family and my children, my wife Elsa, that's the thing I'm by far the most proud of, and that will be the legacy. So,
absolutely. So let's get into the good business of your book. You had already kind of
mhm.
talked about some antidotes, some prescriptions for, a better future. Talk to me a little bit. Give me kind of an abstract and a lead in for people to buy your book.
Yeah. So, right now, this is the most divided generationally and politically that this country has been in a very long time. I'm at 47. It's the worst I've ever seen it.
Yeah,
This book is my call to action for people to get engaged in their communities. So, the best resource that any community has is their people.
yeah,
Coaches, teachers, volunteers, mentors, and those families are by far our best resource. We need to harness that resource to pick up this generation that is really struggling because we have to hand the keys to this country over to these kids. 15, 20 years, 25 years. I have not met a single person that says, man, this generation is good to go. They are squared away. I'm going to hand the keys and coast off into retirement. Uh, we need to do much, much more. And what people need to realize is what they do every single day matters. It
yeah,
matters. The decisions you make, what you choose to do, everybody has something different to give. You know, there's great leaders, there's great coaches. Maybe you just really love animals, so go volunteer at the animal shelter, and
yeah,
that animal can be a comfort animal for someone with some mental health and anxiety issues. Like
yeah,
everybody has something to give, they have to take ownership of it. So, number one, if you don't realize it's a problem, then you can't do anything about it. And then, number two, if you don't feel empowered and that what you do every day matters, makes any difference, then why would you get involved? So, you have to know that that makes a difference, and it takes a village. If we have to own the problem, if it's somebody else's problem, oh, it's not my kid, or it's I'm not a teacher, it's not my problem. I'm not a coach, it's not my problem. It's everybody's problem.
yeah.
Like we're not going to solve it unless people take ownership of it.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you in all these different roles, family, friends, everyone that gets your book, everyone that you work with, but ultimately you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Yeah, just someone who's very driven. And there's probably some mental issues there that, when I grew up, I could never really do anything right. My dad was a little bit tough, and the tough love generation. But I've really have done that. So I basically have kind of constructive ADD where I just can't sit still. And I have some great passions. I love soccer. I love sports. My fantasy football team, I try to do well in every year. But at the end of the day, I have to be doing something that matters. And I'm just very driven. And, I,
That
and at age 47, you just realize I can't change who I am. So just keep rolling with it.
That's it. Yeah, and I realize that now I'm 52 where, the sun's setting now. And I'm not saying that for a dark thing, but
Hopefully that, yeah, you're still young, man.
right, right. No, but what I'm saying is that your whole life before you get to the half century, it's like there's all these things that are just the sun's rising. You're trying to figure it all out. And I only say that it's coming down just because there's a certain shelf life and there's a certain level of you taking everything that you learned early on and really applying it before the sun actually does eventually go down,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
true.
So it is. So let me ask you this, as a sports fan, if we get off this call and a time machine pulls up and you can go anywhere in the history of sports and see one game, where are you going?
Ooh, that I would love to go back to the 1995 Seattle Mariners versus New York Yankees. So
Okay.
game five, where they're down, bottom of the ninth. Ken Griffey Jr. is on first base. Joey Cora lays down a little double, and then Edgar Martinez has the game winning Ken Griffey Jr. The famous slide. So that 95 slide. I'm a
Yeah.
big baseball fan. I've always been a Mariners fan, and that right there is probably the biggest sports moment in my life. I got to watch it on TV as a kid in rural Western Nebraska. My parents split up. My mom was in Seattle. My dad went to Western Nebraska with the railroad. And I would love to see that game in person.
I remember it so well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Such a,
totally.
oh, man.
Man, that'd be great. So let
Yeah.
me ask you this. If anyone wants to pick up your book, reach out, learn more about you, any of the good business in your world, where do they go?
Yeah. Website, waitbehindthespear.com. WEIGHT, waitbehindthespear.com.
Excellent. Dr. Josh, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
A
Keep
pleasure. Thank you.
keep doing the wonderful work, sir.
All right.
Take care.